far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees. Good day, everyone. I'm Donna Jones Simmons, co-author, co-founder, and the architect of the 100 ABC Women project, as well as the executive producer of our fireside chats. Special thanks to our incredible technical support team, our moderator and panelists, who are the drivers behind our weekly inspirational conversations. Let me now turn you over to our moderator, who will introduce herself to you, as well as today's topic. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Onyango, and I am a community radio and television host and self-confessed clutter queen, which is why when I was asked to moderate this, I was like, yes, this is one of my favorite topics. It applies to me. So listen, consumer society, we live in that. Fast fashion is everywhere. retail therapy, you heard of that too, and an unhealthy attachment to possessions. All of these apply to me. The problem with that is it can lead to hoarding and a cluttered physical living space and potentially a cluttered and unhealthy mind. So, this topic is going to be about how we declutter our physical space and how we declutter our minds at the same time. And we have two amazing panelists who are going to help us with that during this conversation. Starting with Rose Nixon. Rose Nixon is the Declutter Coach. She's an award-winning entrepreneur, published author, coach, and mentor. She is the founder and CEO of Really Organized Now, an organizing solutions company that offers in-person and virtual services and resources to help people declutter their living spaces and improve their mental wellness. Welcome, Rose. Then we have Dr. Chrissy Doyle Thomas, PhD. She is a medical neuroscientist and professor in Hamilton, Ontario. She's an expert in medical conditions that affect the brain and mental health. She has received several prestigious fellowships, including fellowships from the Canadian Institute for Health Research and the networks of Centers for Excellence in Excellence of Canada. Welcome, Dr. Chrissy.
Thank you for having me.
So before we jump right into the meat of it all, why don't we hear a bit more about your journey into this line of work? Because you don't just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to specialize in helping people declutter. That's not how that happens. We can start with Rose and then we'll go to Dr. Chrissy.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. This is an honor to speak with you and Dr. Christy and everyone in the 100 ABC Women Network. So thank you for having me here. And yes, I did not wake up like this. So decluttering is something that has gained momentum for me over the years. And the root of it started with disorganization leading to organization, and now the focus on decluttering. So they operate sort of in a different way for each one. As a child, I grew up in a highly clean environment, a highly organized environment. I came from an environment where I had chores at a very young age. There was a process, there was a system, and you had to adhere to it. Not that it was like the army, but I come from Caribbean roots, so there's no joking in my house when it came to that situation. So from very, very young, I had to learn responsibilities, and I had to learn how to organize my time. From picking up my brother when he was a little baby at the babysitter and putting, walking myself to school, coming back home, doing homework, all those kinds of things. And then eventually, as I get older, I eventually have my own kids. And so organization steps in again. Most people as a working mom, that organization plays a big role in how you run the ship, to say lack of better words. So that means, again, keeping an eye on what's happening at school with the kids, keeping an eye on what is happening for your work, keeping an eye on what's happening with family and social. And so there are a lot of moving parts in our lives, and there are elements of organization that can really help us just gain a little bit more control and give us a little bit of a sense of accountability and also a sense of being able to manage everything, because it sometimes often feels like everything is happening at once.
Mm-hmm.
So, the common things that come to people's minds when you say organizing, you'll think of to-do lists, you'll think of a lot of the programs and things that you see on HGTV,
Right.
that whole thing of just, it also I want to say that it also often has a negative connotation to it, because people tend to attribute it to like OCD behavior, like you're
Hmm.
just ultimately obsessed and in
Yeah.
cleaning and organizing and keeping things in a certain way all the time. And for the average person, that's not it.
Yeah. So
Most people
Rose,
are not.
so we're
Yeah.
going to get more into the difference between uh being disorganized and being a clutter queen, because that's a
Okay.
very, you just made a very important point about, the distinction. But now we have a better sense of your journey, which was really upbringing. And I'm wondering why myself, with similar parents and similar upbringing and being the eldest, I ended up the clutter queen that I am. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Dr. Chrissy, you are a scientist.
I am. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm happy to be here this afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. I think this is a great conversation to have. How I came into it is really, I'm passionate about helping people maximize their potential as it relates to understanding how the brain works and how behavior relates to that. So if we can, or if I can help to translate some of the science around some of these issues and put it into terms and practices that we can help our communities live healthier and more mindful lives, I'm always happy to do that. And I think clutter is a very important topic to have because it could have a very significant impact on the brain and our mental wellness. When we think about mental health, it really lies on a spectrum, and we all have mental health the same way we all have physical health, right? Where physical health is the health of the body, mental health is the health of our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, right? So we all have mental health, and as people, we exist up and down the mental health spectrum, from thriving at any one time to coping, struggling, and then being unwell. So if we can figure out and better understand how our behavior is factoring into our mental health, then we can make informed decisions about helping us live a mentally well life. So I'm really happy to be part of this conversation, and I look forward to contributing to it.
So, Dr. Chrissy, before I go back to Rose and the difference between clutter and disorganized, a disorganized physical space and clutter, I want to just very quickly examine with you the difference between someone who's cluttered and someone who's a hoarder, because I I don't know if anybody in our audience is like me, but at one point the show Hoarders, as someone who has a problem with clutter, I used to watch that and it was a lot. Oh, well, no, I'm not that. I'm not that. So the difference, clutter
Yeah.
queens and kings and hoarders.
It's a great question, and we have to understand that human behavior exists on a spectrum. Everything we experience and all our behaviors, we can go from having it be functional to having it impacting our quality of life. And I think when we talk about things like hoarding, like chronic hoarding, when it gets into a clinically significant space, we're talking about it impacting the quality of your life. If you're accumulating things, but you're still functioning in your everyday life, there might be a spectrum of hoarding, but with the help of experts like Rose, we can get that under control, right? And we can figure out ways to organize our spaces so that we can even have more optimal health, right? So there's always a spectrum on which people lie. And when we think about the impact on hoarding, it can actually affect your brain. Now, everything we do is a product of our brain, and it can also have an effect on it. When we think about the science of hoarding, there is data that shows us that there are structural changes in our brain, like parts of our brains that can increase, right, when we have chronic hoarding. It could also be associated with reduced cognitive function, right? Attention deficit issues, difficulties with categorization and organization. And these things can impact our quality of life. So that's when we're getting into clinically significant challenges, right? These can be quite distressing. It can lead to social isolation. It could really impact our daily functioning. But as I mentioned before, these behaviors all exist along a spectrum. They range from mild to severe, and not all people that accumulate stuff are really considered hoarders. So it's really important to kind of figure out How is that behavior impacting your quality of life? Can I bring some order to it with the helps of experts, or just a change in behavior on our own? And seek advice of professionals if we need that assistance in getting things under control.
Speaking of seeking advice from professionals, so Rose, I asked you earlier the distinction between being like a clutter king or queen and just being disorganized and lazy, disorganized and lazy together.
Okay, so the lazy word often gets attributed to disorganization. And I think over time, people have realized that it's not necessarily a good attribution to put lazy with disorganization, because there's often under the surface way more going on. And so the fact that somebody may not have maybe the energy to organize, or they have maybe the mental capacity to process certain things that is necessary to organize. There might be other things going on in their life that's prohibiting them from taking action. So I don't like to necessarily use the word lazy at all in my processing or helping clients at all, even though the clients themselves may say that to me. So, again, much of the things that Dr. Chrissy outlined would have to be looked at. So there's definitely something about peeling back the onion or going a little bit deeper to see what is the source. What is the source of that inaction or inability, because it can be both. So clutter basically is, referring to disorganized collections of things or items. You often think of it of things just being unsorted and scattered all over the place, or things like you'll walk into a room and you see stacks and stacks of something, or piles and piles of something, and or things just basically being out of place. Organization is often it's more of the process of arranging the items and structuring them in a way that is more intentional for access and functionality. So that is a clear distinction. Hoarding, like you mentioned, it's a disorder on the very extreme end of it. And as we just outlined, it's more complex than what's on the surface. So often a person may need a team of professionals to help them figure it out. So I myself may not be able to do it on my own. So as an example, I don't specialize in hoarding, whereas there are some professional organizers who do specialize in hoarding. So that's important for people to know, that there's also professionals that have distinctions in what their specialties are, which means that they have even more in-depth knowledge and strategies that are going to best help whoever the client is. So it's important to know those distinctions. And also, like when you think about disorganization or clutter, you think, I think before we got on live, you mentioned the word minimalism. And a lot of people talk about minimalism, and that's a real big buzzword right now, is minimalism, because we are a consumer society. But minimalism itself as well is another thing that should not get lumped in with clutter and disorganization, because it really is a whole different process, and it's more so adapting yourself to a whole new way of living. So it's a lifestyle. So when everything gets thrown into the bucket, that even makes it harder. So it is good to have a distinction of what, or definition of what these words that you keep hearing, and seeing what do they really mean? What do they really mean? And how does that really affect you, the person who is being challenged? And what category do you fall into? And also, all of those same things also kind of work or piggyback off of each other, depending on where you are in your process. So the words will come up, or they may come up in strategy as part of your solution-based plan. So.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you very much for that, Rose. And it made me think of the Marie Kondo method and all of that. some very well-meaning relative one Christmas decided that that was a very good Christmas gift for me. And I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
yeah. And I was like, what are you saying?
So they
And
got you the service? They got you the service based on
no,
what
not the
her,
service, the
oh,
book.
oh, the book. Okay,
And
okay.
another Christmas, another well-meaning relative got me an entire season of Hoarders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So those are
when,
both
yeah,
great things
yeah,
to have because, first of all, it's indicating to you that your friends or family, they care because they're going off of maybe what you've been experiencing or what you've been telling them about your experiences, and they recognize that you need help and they may not be the ones to help you. So they've gotten third party resources or people to help you. So there's nothing wrong with that. But for example, watching hoarders day in and day out or binging hoarders will give you anxiety. I'm a professional organizer and it gives me anxiety to watch it because there is so much going on in that hoarder's life and in that hoarder's living space that it becomes now, it can be even a trigger for somebody who's not on that spectrum, right?
mhm,
Who's not experiencing that.
right.
So for me, I've never lived in an environment like that. I
Mhm,
feel badly for the people who do because they have it's gone off the rails in terms of managing and living the life that maybe they expected. I mean, Dr. Chrissy can maybe
yes,
feed off a little bit more into that. But
yes,
there's just so many layers there. So yes, it's interesting to watch it, but it's not
yeah.
necessarily the thing for maybe somebody like yourself who
Mhm,
is challenged and needs help, but it's not necessarily the tool to help you. The
okay.
book, on the other hand, is getting closer
Yeah.
to what you may need
Mhm,
versus someone else may need.
mhm,
And the book has elements that definitely you can adhere to and is in principle
mhm,
foundational across the board, no matter who you hire, what show you look at. A
mhm.
lot of the organization principles are the same for everyone. The
Okay,
delivery will be, the person will be different, but it's pretty much the same. So
thanks for
good
that.
on that,
Yeah.
but not necessarily for you.
Yeah, I was just annoyed, period. I was
Okay.
offended and annoyed, and that was the end of that conversation. So
Yeah.
let's get into really the nitty-gritty now about how you sort of, where do you start when you want to declutter? And we're going to talk about the mental health aspect first and then get into all the technical aspects with Rose, because her that's her business. That's what she does. Dr. Chrissy. So you're sitting there with all this clutter and you're looking at it, and what? What do you do?
Yeah, so I love the definition that Rose gave off the top about when we talk about clutter, right? Because it helps us to kind of understand what we're talking about. And then when we talk about the impact on our wellness, we're like, okay, we're relating it to the accumulation of stuff, the lack of organization, the lack of control, right, over what we have accumulated. And those things, just mentioning that, you can almost anticipate what I'm about to say, how it affects mental wellness. We're talking about an increase in stress. So cluttered physical environments can really increase your stress. Just the visual stimuli of things being out of order, it's really overwhelming for our senses and difficult for our brain to relax and find focus. It can also reduce our concentration. When we think about how distracted we are, it makes it challenging to focus on our task when everything is out of order and we potentially can't find what we need. That can also lead to elevated anxiety. We heard Rose just use that word as well. It can affect your feeling of being overwhelmed and anxious in your space because there's a sense of chaos and disorganization. And again, it can impact our mood. These are all kinds of things that trigger kind of negative mood experiences, maybe even depression when folks folks don't know where to start to begin to find order in this. It can start to impact our sleep, because in the presence of clutter, it makes it hard for us to relax and have a sense of ease, right? We could also reduce our productivity if we can't find what we need to find and access the things that we need. We're really taking up our mental energy that can be on other tasks, trying to navigate a cluttered space, right? And that can be very draining. So all of these things can really have a compounding effect on our well-being. So having a plan to declutter our spaces, and we'll talk about decluttering our mind, but decluttering our spaces can give us back a sense of control, which is really important. I think a lot of kind of angst comes up when we feel out of control in the experience that we are living. So it will give us a sense of control. Where we have an organized space, it would help to alleviate the stress and anxiety that we might feel. We might feel more empowered because we're managing our environments better. That will definitely clear up our mind, helping us to have a clear, clarity away from visual and mental distraction. It will help us to be more productive in our times because we now know where everything is, take away that cognitive load, right? Help us to make better decisions because now we're freed up our mental space from figuring out where things are and how to organize ourselves to the actual task, and really lead to a more positive environment. So the action of decluttering our space can have a very positive impact on our mental wellness and productivity at large. So it really is a very important thing for us to understand that our behavior, our living environment can impact us mentally based on the clarity of our thoughts and how we are functioning and our ability to show up in life in all of our roles when we are organized and in control of our physical space.
Wonderful.
Love
So
that.
how do we go? We're going to Rose now because she's the expert on the how to do the physical decluttering. How do you make choices? What are you keeping? What are you getting rid of? How are you getting rid of it? What is that process like?
Okay, so even before you get to that stage, you have to have an awareness that there is a challenge and that you have to acknowledge the challenge. And then you may enlist someone like myself, which I do recommend for most people to enlist professional help, because what you're getting is a support system, right, in place to help you go through the various stages and the process itself. And sometimes you need unbiased, somebody who's a little bit further from the root or the environment to come in and have a clean set of eyes, a clean set of assessive ability to determine what is really going on here and how can we best put certain things in place. So in what I do, I always come in to physically assess the space. And over time, especially in the last 3 years, I've had to adopt to doing some of that virtually. But the majority of people need someone who comes in and actually takes an assessment of the physical space and to see the level at which the things have accumulated and what is the current. So I like to ask people, like, what is the current process they're using for the management of their things? So yes, we're out here in the world and we are seeing things we love. We're seeing things we're passionate about. We're seeing things that a friend maybe recommended is a great thing to have. And we purchase it or we buy it or we acquire it in whatever manner, bring it into the home, and then it sits. It might sit on a countertop. It might sit in the box on the floor. Some of us never open the item that we bought or brought home. So getting a good understanding of how does this person use not only the things, but the space when they are in it? How many people are using the space? Because often in my realm, I work with a lot of women, families. So most of them have children. It's not just you in the space, So now you have to take into account, how is this space actually being used by everyone who lives in the space? So now there's even more. And what is the activity that happens in the space? How, like, the frequency of activity. If you have school-age children, that door is something that people are flowing through nonstop throughout the day, for example. Or if you are a working person and you work outside of the home, whereas a lot of people are now working within the home, you have to look at, again, the frequency of how you're using, when you're using the space. So getting a sense of that is where I start. Or if somebody's doing it on their own, I would suggest you sit down and take a look at what space is causing you the most challenge, and maybe write it down, and then continue along throughout the home and stack it up in terms of priority. And then once you look at that, look at what are the elements within that space that are really bothering you. Is it the closet that you can't fit any more hangers into, or closet, or it's spilling out, or you can't shut the door? Is it like, the cupboard space that every time you open it, there are things that are, missing and mismatched, and like it's just too much going on, or, like those kind of things. Just really take a look at your space and see what is really happening. If you have a third party coming in, they may be able to discern that very quickly for you, because it's fresh eyes, right? And then next to that is determining, who can I get to maybe assist me with taking action to getting this cleared up, getting this organized. So it may have a third party, it may be a family member, it may be a spouse, it might be, a whoever, a friend. And so if you can get help, or you can get someone that you can delegate certain activities to. Delegation really helps, and designation helps. So then the next thing with that is, okay, when can I get started? Is it today? Is it something that I can start today on a small scope? Is it something that I have to do next weekend? Is it something that I need to do once a week? So again, the time and then the frequency. So you'll need to determine that. That's where, again, a third party person can come in and really help you plan that out and scope that out. Because again, as we've said, everything can seem overwhelming. And the more you get into it, sometimes the more overwhelmed you feel, and then that stops you. So starting stops you, and getting into it can stop you. And that's why often a coach is needed, or a declutter professional person like myself is needed to help you kind of keep moving forward, because it is action based, right? You have to take action with it.
Thanks very much for that, because my journey, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, I was like, okay, I'm fed up with all this, and it's spring, I want to be able to do this in this space, and I can't, because there's all of this other stuff that's in it, and it'll go in spurts, like feverishly.
Okay, so you mentioned spring, and that's really great that you mentioned spring, because one of the techniques I use, especially for someone who's not on the extreme, is the seasonal decluttering, right? But again, that now encompasses that maybe for 3 months, you've been accumulating even more stuff, right? So it can still be daunting and it can still be overwhelming, but at least if you know that every season, at the top of the season, or the changeover between seasons, is now an indicator that something has to take action. Somewhere you have to take action. So if it means decluttering your closet, for example, because now you're changing over from winter into spring, this is a great opportunity. And it's a great trigger for your brain to say, okay, now we're moving into a new phase in our life, a new change of season. We want to refresh and renew. And, there's a whole thing that comes with every season. There's a feeling that we get, there's an energy that we get. And if you put it all together, action can be taken at that time, right? So I think it's those subtle things that we can use, and everybody has that accessible to them. So there's no money involved. There's no, you don't have to have a third party to say, hey, okay, I can take action between winter and spring season, right? And then the other thing with that too is, just being able to identify what you need to declutter and why you need to declutter it, right? In using the season. The other thing is you want to get into the space eventually and over time where decluttering does not become something that you have to think about in the sense like, oh, here it comes again, like I have to do this chore type of thing, like the chore mentality. If you can eventually get yourself into a space where it kind of feels almost second nature, where there isn't a lot of thought into it, but that can only happen over time once you've put processes and habits in place and systems in place, and that you're using them time and time and time and time again, where it's like no big deal for you.
Okay,
Right?
yeah.
Most people, it is a stop and go, stop and go, stop and go.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Rose. And you talked about mentality. We're going back to Dr. Chrissy, because there's a lot of it is mental, right? And so how do you go about that mental decluttering that frees you up to sort of have the clarity that you need to do the work that Rose is talking about?
Great question. And one thing I just kind of want to build off of what Rose said, she mentioned earlier that she would recommend a declutter expert or specialist to assist in most cases. And I just want to talk a bit about why that can be helpful. I think, and for many of us, when we accumulate stuff, there might be an emotional attachment, really strong emotional attachment to
That would be me.
Right. Where, it might be reminders of our past experiences, our loved ones, some kind of sense of security. And having that third party help us to make sense. Now, all of these things, especially the emotional attachment, is really coded in our emotional centers of our brain. So if we have a third party there to help us bring on those cognitive centers to make sense of what is the meaning of this, and is this something that we can encapsulate in an effective way or productive way, or is this something that we can it's something we can let go of? That person can help you to make sense of something that's quite emotional, right? To kind of bring on those cognitive processes to help that work a little bit better. Sometimes we really perceive the usefulness of something in the future, like we're anticipating its use in the future. And
just in case mentality.
Just in case. And
you
that
never know.
Exactly. A lot of anxiety and potential, the scarcity, or maybe I need this in the future and I just don't know, right? Or the fear of discarding something. It could really create a fear in people, right? So having a third party come in and help with that could be quite effective. So I just want to kind of just a plug for Rose and individuals like her. Now, of course, some folks can do this on their own. But when we do have those emotional attachments, it could be beneficial to have someone who doesn't have that attachment there to help you think through those things, right? Talking more about kind of the mental decluttering, there's a bit of it that comes also with the action of decluttering, right? You need to declutter your space so you have a clear mind. When we talk about mental decluttering, sometimes it's not the physical things, but we just have too many thoughts in there. Like we have too many, things that we're worrying about, things that haven't been prioritized or what have you that we haven't written down that we need to focus a bit on. And if we talk about some mental wellness strategies or self-care strategies that can start or help with those things, when we're talking more about mental decluttering, we're talking about things like mindfulness, right? Just practicing being very present in the moment, bringing your attention to the present moment and really cultivating a non-judgmental awareness of your thoughts and emotions and trying to get beneath all of that. You know, we can talk about prioritization and time management, even when it comes to addressing our home, right? Prioritizing, what room do we start with, right? I saw that question come up in the chat there. Like, can I prioritize sections of my homes and allocate it with a time, right? That kind of thing can also help to declutter our mind and give us a sense of control about this, kind of letting go of the judgmental language that we sometimes feel when we feel guilt or shame for these accumulations. And as Rose says, sometimes it's out of our control. It's not about laziness. It might just be that we don't know where to start. So letting go of some of that negative thinking and really thinking about, okay, what are practical ways that I can address this? Reframing those negative thoughts into more positive thinking can help us with these kinds of decluttering. You know, working with our mind as we work with decluttering our physical space.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much for that, Dr. Chrissy. And I just following people on Facebook, I noticed that the pandemic, I know for me, the pandemic was quite the wake-up call to the amount of clutter in my living space, because like many, women who work full-time, who are very involved in the community, I was barely home. I wasn't home. So I didn't really, I didn't see the clutter. And then all of a sudden, everything stopped. And everybody was home, and I was home all the time, working from home, doing everything. And so, Rose, back to you. You talked about how to start, how to plan your decluttering. What kind of tools, physical tools? Like for myself, I ended up accumulating a lot of plastic containers.
Oh,
I thought I was really smart to sort of sort things using, these plastic containers and just piling them up. So what tools do you recommend for decluttering, like physical tools?
okay, so one of the things that I did think was a positive thing that came out of the pandemic, for example, is the fact that it showed us that we can, in fact, live with less, right? And for a lot of us, we had to really reevaluate the food we consume, how much of it, how much we're willing to pay for certain things, how, what are the elements of things that we actually really need on a day-to-day basis. So it made us really focus in on essentialism. What are things that are essential to my way of living or my anticipated way of living? And what can I actually use that is functionable for me? So in a lot of the work that I do, I encourage people to use the less is more mentality, right? If you start off from that and become more mindful in what you purchase, you will be more mindful in what you bring into the space, right? So yes, we can be very impulsive with what we buy. We see shiny objects and we want the shiny objects and we bring the shiny objects home, but in actuality, we don't need the shiny object, or the shiny object does not help us do our work better or faster, or it does not really enhance our enjoyment in as a person or as a family or as a employee. Like it's really bearing no real benefit to your life. It simply is a shiny object. So getting rid of impulse buying, I think, is a big thing, but that takes time to develop that as well. So even just this is a common thing, making a list when you're shopping or throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the season, really noting down, what do I need, right? Not just what do I want, but what do I need? Start prioritizing. What are the things that are essential to your function in life and to meeting your objectives in life? Then, one of the other things that you can do is a common practice in organization is the to-do list, putting down the to-do list, but keeping your to-do list, I like number 3, 5, or 7. It just seems to be a good way to balance things. For me, 3 things, tops. If you put 3 things down on a to-do list, put them in order of the priority. Put them with a deadline date, like a start date and a deadline date. Use things like timers or the notifications on your phone. We all have a Google or iCalendar. Put the things that you need to get accomplished during the week, during the day, in a block of certain time. Put that in and get the reminders. And I know reminders are annoying to a lot of people because we're consuming so much more technology. And it actually is another route to anxiety for a lot of people. But if you really get focused in on what are the essential things that you do need reminding of, then use those tools. Like our phones are a really big tool for us to establish certain habits for ourselves. And as you know, there's an app for everything. So, enlisting certain apps, use the technology to your benefit. Enlisting certain apps that can maybe help you stay a little bit more focused on what is essential to your productivity and to your lifestyle and to your energy, protecting your energy.
But that's more sort of the prevention aspect. But I was literally talking about physical tools. Like, is it a good idea to get bins and containers and storage tools?
Storage tools, absolutely. There's a place for everything, but you have to create that space, right? So the first action is to declutter the space. So you should not be bringing in without taking out. Right? You should not be bringing things into your environment that you have not removed. The older things, the things that are not usable, non-functioning, never opened, all of those things. So whether it's through donation or giving it to a family member or to a friend or giving it to a school or somebody else that can utilize it or selling it on one of the online platforms, either way, get it out and then reintroduce the newer, more effective, functional items into it. So yes, bins, boxes, any kind of storage capacity is always good, but there needs to be a system in place. Simply getting boxes without a strategy is just boxes without a strategy. So that again leads to why it might be important to get the support and the coaching of a third-party professional to help you design that system within the home or that particular space. And there's no two ways about it. The aesthetic value of getting something that is cohesive and organized and complementary to your already established environment, with your decor and all of that, that's the pretty stuff, that's the great stuff. But without a system in place, it's just pretty stuff. So a lot of the tools is based off of the mindset. So we have to adopt certain mindsets in order to then introduce the tools, because there's tons of tools. There's so many tools, and actually sometimes there's too much tools. It's like, for example, I'm not a kitchen gadget person. So I do not go out of my way to invest in the next new kitchen gadget. But then there are some people that every time something rolls out, they're onto it. And they use it maybe for the first month, and it sits in the cupboards for the next 3 years. Because they're not using that to bake bread, and they're not using that to chop vegetables, and they're not using it for anything other than taking up counter space or cupboard space, which could be utilized for things that you actually need. And the other thing that people need to remember, it's okay to have blank spaces in your home, in your mind. It's okay to have a Saturday where you do nothing for no one and think of nothing for no one and think like just dreamscape, or just, you've got to have that blank space. It helps us rejuvenate and recreate, right? So it's okay that your walls are not, captivated by all things shiny and all things organized. If you
Mhm.
do not have a system, there's no point in that.
Yeah, the
There's
importance
no
of having
point.
a pardon? Sorry. The
No, go
importance
ahead.
of having a system. Thank you very much for really, really highlighting that. And since you talked about, we're going back now to the mindset. I'm going to go back to Dr. Chrissy, because guilty. When I'm sitting around and I'm not doing anything and I'm not running around, guilt sets in, right? But Dr. Chrissy, Rose gave a very, very useful strategy, which is for everything that you want to bring in or have brought in, something has to go out. Like there has to be some in and out sort of movement. How do you detach from these things? What is the mental process of detach so that you can declutter?
Yeah, that's a great idea, and really that's a question for the therapists and the psych and the clinical folks, right? I can share a little bit of the research behind it, but those step by step of how do you detach becomes if you need it, more of a clinical intervention, right? And I think to where there isn't that clinical need, I think the assistance of a support like Rose could help you detach, because they're bringing in that cognitive problem solving aspect where you're making decisions about, the usefulness of it, the need for multiple, can openers, right? The need for multiple types of one thing, and that kind of usefulness. So definitely the support of the experts, I think, is something that's very important. I also want to just kind of talk about one other thing that Rose brought up that I really liked, and it was when she was talking about the 3, 5, and 7. And I might not fully understand about the 3, 5, and 7, but what I got from that is that small pockets, small goals, right? We're really trying to have manageable goals that could be attainable. And I really like that, because that goes a lot with how the brain works and our reward system works, right? When we are able to accomplish SMART goals, small, measurable, kind of attainable, results-oriented, and timely goals, we are more likely to get the motivation to continue on to do more stuff. So they can't be big, lofty goals like I'm going to flip my whole house this spring, and we're going to be amazing this summer, and I'm going to turn a new leaf in my life. It's not that at all. It's like, what 3 things can I do that are small and manageable that I can check off a list, and that act of checking it off will spur our reward system. Again, everything we do changes the brain. It will spur our reward system and get us motivated to do more, to get that feeling again. We're going to say, okay, we've accomplished these 3. What other 2, 3 things can I add? So I really like that. And I would say that that's a great and useful way to help us to kind of work through the mindset of bringing order to the space.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. People in the chat have been talking about, okay, I've decluttered. Where do I take this stuff? What do I do with it? Where does it go? How do I organize that? The purging.
So the majority of stuff that will probably come out of a decluttering session is just garbage. They don't work. They don't need, you can't pass it on to anybody. So that's a good thing. So it would also be good to schedule your decluttering sessions around your garbage dates. So garbage pickup dates are really important, I feel, because then you're not stuck with the bags or the boxes of things sitting around you for too long. So if it's coordinated around that same time, it's out. That's it. You don't ever have to think about it, because I've seen people go back to the garbage and take things out.
Really?
Because they've had time to rethink it. And that's often not a good thing. It should be a smooth movement. You make the decision, you stick to your decision, and then you move on. But a lot of people, if you give them time to rethink things, they will, they go back into that whole process all over again. Next to that will be like donations. There are tons across the city. You can Google for your area who does pickup donations. So for maybe more than 10 years, I've always used the Diabetes Foundation. They do a clothing pickup donation thing. So they call you and they will say, hey, we're going to be in your neighborhood on this date. Do you have anything for pickup? And you can just simply say yes or no, no big deal. And you can also remind them, please keep me on the list for the next set of calls, right? So every maybe 2 months or so, they'll call and say, we're having a pickup in your area. And they come and they pick it up for free. You don't have to really do much. All you have to do is prepare the stuff and you put it on your outside of your environment on that date. That's it. They pick it up. Or you can drive it to a pickup site, a donation site, as we know, like, the Goodwills and Salvation Army and all of those type of things. And then there's also community groups, right? Community groups are always looking for things like gently used anything, household items, clothing, shoes, electronics, all of those things. So you may be able to donate it to them or have them come and pick it up. Often there is no charge. So you can drop it off or pick it up. Looking at refugee centers, things like that, like people who just came to the country, maybe in need of certain items. Again, keeping in mind that it needs to be useful working items. Do not donate things that do not work. It just puts stress on the people who are running the organization to now go into this whole thing of trying to figure it out and then having to decide, how do we now dispose of that item? So do some of the work up front for them. Do not donate things that are dirty or stained or whatever. Like, it needs to be gently used and in good working condition so that somebody else can get full benefit from it, even though now you don't use it. And or you can do online. A lot of people are really great, like Facebook. I think
Marketplace.
Facebook there's Kijiji, there's Carrot, there's tons of Craigslist. There's so many online spaces that you can resell your goods. And again, gently used, good condition, take really great photos, and get rid of it that way. If you know a friend who really likes the same things that you do, or has been eyeing that mixer on your table that you haven't used all year because they haven't seen a cake or bread from you all year, like maybe you can pass it on to them and say, hey, you know what, like re-gift it. Say, you know what, I realized, or maybe they have a kid who's really into baking. Give somebody who can use the item and stop keeping items that you do not use. Like, we've got to adopt just very simple mind tricks for ourselves. Like, we don't have to hold on to everything. And yes, you're thinking, yeah, but I spent a lot of money on that. That mixer was like $500. And it's like, okay, but what is more beneficial to you right now? The counter space, the $500 that you spent 5 years ago, never baked a bread. It's now depleted in value anyway. And it's $500 that you actually did not make use of for 5 years. So reframe how we think about things and how we think about things in relation to people. Because what's more important, the things or the people? Your peace of mind or the thing? Like, we've got to start doing that more consciously. And that, to me, will help deplete it. And it's the same thing you mentioned, like fast fashion, right?
Yes.
They're just buying stuff because it looks cute and it's just for the season. I only bought it for $5. That's the mentality we have. But then that accumulates over time, because now you have $500 worth of $5 t-shirt that you don't wear because it's now not in season, it's not on trend, you're not, whatever. What was the point of that?
Mm-hmm.
So you spent the money already. You spend the same $500 regardless, whether you spend it on one item at $500 or 50 items at $10. Like, you know what I mean? Either way, you've spent it.
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So you've got to we have to just reframe the way we think about our things and
Yeah.
how those things play a role in our lives. And if
Yeah.
we become more focused on the mindset of things, I think we'll see that the impact is going to change in a more positive way, whether it's for the environment or for our living spaces or for our mental wellness. You know, that's for me,
Yeah.
that's what's it.
Thanks for that, Rose. I see Dr. Chrissy agreeing energetically there about reframing the way we think about things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to add to what Rose has so well stated, right? Some other things we can do is set a budget. Like if we're talking about that online shopping bit, because I saw a question come about Amazon.
Amazon
I
and
have a
other,
little bit of
yeah.
an Amazon,
Yeah.
challenge there. But like, some things that have come up, just practical ways are also just set a budget for online shopping. And when you reach that budget, that's it for the month. You're not going to spend any more. Some other things you can do is create a waiting period instead of like a buy now impulsive buy. You can leave it in your basket and then wait for that cooling off period to pass, and then within 24 or 48 hours go back and say, do I really need this? Right? It kind of slows down that impulse and helps our brain bring on more of those like deep thinking decision-making processes, as opposed to being driven by the want and desire, which is a lot more, reactive, right? Before you go on Amazon or any one of those online systems, make a list of what you actually need and try to avoid just seeing what's there. That would actually help to not accumulate more than you actually need. One thing that I do is remove saved payment options so that every single time I buy something, I have to re-enter my payment information. It kind of slows the process down a bit to make me really think, do I really need this? And those kinds of things helps us to not accumulate too much stuff when we talk about shopping, right? We already have a lot of stuff in the physical space. Now, how can we slow down ourselves to not go impulsively, and our brain has those different systems, right? We have an impulse system and we have a cognitive slower system that really kicks in to help us make more informed decisions. So the point of those strategies are to detach from the impulse and bring about more thoughtful decision making.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for that. Wow, I can't believe a whole hour has gone by. Rose, did you want to add something? You look
No,
like you
I was
wanted to.
just agreeing with everything she said.
Yeah.
I really love the idea of giving distance between yourself and the thing. The cooling off period is really good technique.
Yeah, I agree that has worked for me. That has saved me many unnecessary purchases. And my rule of thumb is, if 48 hours later you close your eyes and you still see that thing, it's worth considering. You don't have to buy it, but it's worth considering maybe if you should. And more often than not, even after 48 hours of obsessing over it, I go and look at the thing and it's like, nah, not really. And when there's the nah, not really, well, then you don't need it, evidently. So I'm wondering if, because you really hit on a lot of some of the comments in the chat that I'm seeing people agreeing with you about stuff that has expired, prioritizing what you need to throw away, this whole thing about Amazon and how they've really facilitated all of this accumulation and clutter, and people also giving suggestions like you gave the one about the Diabetes Association, donating gently used, functional, clean clothing, shoes, etc. So yes, somebody has a question about passing on items to children
Oh, so
and
you're talking
family
about like,
members.
yeah, so like you're talking about older maybe parents and now passing it on legacy items type of
Yeah.
thing? Yeah.
And I'm assuming they're not talking about expensive jewelry that someone can go sell for a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, you know what, I think for anything that relates to the family or passing down or passing on things that are relatable to the family, it might be a good idea to actually host a meeting or, you know, like an online forum for the family members to say, hey, you know what, I'm going through this process. There's a lot of things that I want to be able to know that are still going to be around when I am gone, and I want them to be left in some very appreciative hands, or, you know, somebody who is, you know, diligent in taking care of or curating things. So here are the items that I'm looking at. Is there anyone within this environment, in this forum, who would like to have it? Or could you see yourself using it? So I think communication is key when you're doing something like that. Communicating to people what your intent is, and then what is their if they have any intent of wanting to be part of that process with you. And if they
Mhm.
don't, that's fine. Because again, if you do have things that maybe are more valuable, definitely you want to really look at that as a family group. And if it's something that's maybe not so much, it's just more sentimentality type of thing, maybe you want to talk to the person who gave it to you, or the person, you know, you were on the trip with, that that's how you guys acquired it. Hey, you know what, I'm not using it anymore, or I'm not wearing it anymore. You know, maybe you went to India for a trip and you got a sari and you don't wear it really, but you know, it just still is such a beautiful piece, and you know what the experience you had when you bought it and all of that. And so maybe that person that was on the trip with you might like it, or you know what I mean? So there's different ways to repurpose and revalue things within the family
Mhm.
setting or friend group. I think communication is a big part of that.
Yeah, communication is pretty much everything, because when, you
Yeah.
know, people can't read your mind and sort of know your
Yeah.
intent by magic or osmosis. And Dr. Chrissy, did you want to add something about familial sort of, you know, handing down items?
Yeah, no, I think I love the idea of putting it in a common forum, right? And allowing people to say that they want it or not. And I think that addresses that emotional attachment piece that I was talking about before, that sometimes is really a limiting factor for folks to distance themselves from stuff, whether it was because of a past experience, loved ones, or, you know, a sense of security. And that could make it easier for someone to let go of a possession, because they're carrying it, it's staying in the family, and they're giving it to someone else who would appreciate the value and the sentiment behind it. So I think it's a great practical way to address some of the emotional kind of meaning that we give to things that makes it hard for us to detach. So that was great. And I think for those reasons, it's something that you can do if you find yourself having a very difficult time distancing from something that is emotionally valuable to you.
And Nicole sort of alluded to that when she talked about, and this was suggested by Rose earlier, you know, something you really care about, a piece of clothing, a jewelry, etc., giving it to somebody. And I started doing that with my African clothing, because everybody who knows me knows my obsession with my African culture and clothing and jewelry, etc. I have during the pandemic, I have found close friends who, unbeknownst to me, have been, you know, eyeing my stuff, and I've been able to sort of hand it over and actually see them wear it. There is such a like a feeling, a gratifying feeling to see
Yeah.
someone you care about wearing something you wore maybe once, or maybe they've never even wore. That happens to me a lot. And there they
Yeah.
are, and they look splendid. And so the decluttering can have rewards like that. Somebody has a question about storage.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on investing in a storage space?
Okay, so I love that you use the word investing, because Essentially, that's what it is. There's often a big number that's attached to offsite storage, for example. If you do engage in offsite storage, it can go from, oh, I just want to leave it here for a couple months while we settle into the house or settle into the new apartment. And it turns into 3 years. It now turns into 5 years. And when you look at how much you've paid in storage during that time, you have to really ask yourself, was it worth it? What was the value in me storing things that I haven't looked at and that I haven't valued or that I haven't loved on for 3 odd years? It physically is not in your eyesight. You don't see it. You don't breathe it. You don't touch it. You don't do anything with it. So why are you paying for it? Now, I understand if you have valuable, okay, let's say estate auction type items. Okay, if you have those type of items and they are legacy items and you now need to store it because you've downsized, I can get with you on that. But when you are storing things like toaster ovens, okay, that yes, had a value at one point, but really realistically have no real value in the scope of your life and your legacy, you should not be paying to store things that, again, like we say, are non-functional, not usable, kind of broken, needs to be fixed, you know, the list goes on of all the reasons why we don't maybe want it in the environment that we're currently living in, but we want to store it and pay for it offsite. That is something to really, really think hard about. Now, if you, let's say you're making a move and you have to move from one place to another, and the place that you now have moved into is much smaller than the place that you are currently living in, that downsizing effect, you need to really look at that again, because the only thing you should be storing are things that are going to be essential to you in the scope of when you get settled in to the new space and you've reevaluated how you're going to do the space. And so a lot of these things can be avoided if you're doing upfront planning. But on average, the realism is that most of us don't do that. And that's okay. There shouldn't be a judgment placed on it, but it is something that we need to be aware of in terms of how are we planning and strategizing our move, our downsizing, our whatever. And again, if that's the case, who wants it? Who could use it? Before you put it on the truck to move it to a storage space, figure out who else could maybe use it and save yourself the whole storage activity. But obviously, sometimes you cannot avoid it. So yes, there's storage, but be cognizant of what is it that you're putting into storage. That's an opportunity for you to declutter further. So yes, you've sorted through the things you're keeping in their current environment, but let's do a sort and then a resort of what is actually going to go into storage. Let's stop storing things that really have no value to our lives, right?
Dr.
A lot of
Chrissy,
people.
your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Rose, you know, and I feel like a lot of this is hard. This is hard work, everyone. None of this comes easily, right? So it sounds like there are a lot of tools, which there are, but it really does take a toll on us. Like it really does affect our ability to feel accomplished and well, like we're making the right decision and not second guessing ourselves. Shame, guilt, all these things can come when we're doing all of this very hard work. So I just want to put it out there that we should give ourselves some grace, because this really does take a lot of mental and emotional processing to work through this process. Just to reiterate a little bit, like, you know, reflect on the value and goals of the things that you want to keep, right? What is the true value of this? You could even do it in a very gradual way, like let go of things that you're less attached to, and then move up to the bigger things, right? So to tackle the things that are easier to tackle. Again, it's the small wins. It's the things that can help your brain get motivated through that reward system. So tackle the easier things and then move on to the big couch, right? We can gradually get to the bigger items, both figuratively and physically, right? And kind of visualize also the future benefit. If you don't see yourself using these things in 5 years or even a year from now, let that be part of the process and letting these things go. And of course, we've been talking a lot about donating and repurposing, and these things, again, it's a lot of cognitive work, very, very difficult to do. So give yourself some time to do it. But then after you do that hard work, you can figure out, do I really need storage space, or have I cut it down well within a manageable amount?
Thanks. Oh, Rose?
I just wanted to also add, there is no such thing as a junk drawer. So everyone who has a junk drawer, you need to release yourself from that junk drawer. There is no such thing as a junk drawer. If it is junk, it does not need a drawer. You're doing yourself a disservice. So everything should have a place and a space in your environment. So if you're bringing in things that feel junk, there's only one place for junk, which is in the garbage, or calling a service, a junk removal service, if it's big items, to get them out of there. So, and I know, we'll throw pens, we'll throw paper, tape, we'll throw this, that, and the other. No, there should be a place in your office where you put tape and envelopes and whatever. There should be a place where you keep like your mail, your incoming mail that you haven't opened yet and haven't assessed yet. There should be a place where you keep, half bottles of this or half canisters of that. Like, we need to not keep inviting the clutter into our environments, because
Stop
that
right
junk
there.
drawer never stopped.
Stop right there. We need to stop inviting the clutter into our space. I need a t-shirt with that.
Okay, I'm on it. Send me the size. Yeah, no, I mean, so much of decluttering and organizing is, as we've said, is the mental portion. It's the mindset portion. Like, that's where it all starts. Yeah. Right? Just even the fact that we're thinking of ourselves in a judgmental way when it comes to clutter shows you that it starts up here, because now you're judging yourself. And to Chrissy's point, Dr. Chrissy's point, we're not giving ourselves enough grace in our process or processing of what is happening with us as it pertains to, or in relationship to, our things. And we cannot value our things more than we value ourselves. And so if you can release yourself of that attachment, you are winning half the battle already, right? Because now you can just, again, put into the strategy, the planning, the storage capacity, all of those things, all the tools can come into play, but we've got to start up here.
Somebody has a question, and this is, because some of us have been in this situation. You're going through a divorce.
Tell them to take it.
How do you sort? How do you go about, prioritizing what to keep, what to get rid of when you're going through a divorce, and especially if you have kids?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, nothing changes from everything that we just discussed.
Right.
And then on the other hand, there's that element of shared, the legalities of shared items. So if it's a divorce where you do have items that now you have to decide who gets it, that's something that, is on a legal scope. So again, itemizing all the things that you definitely want to keep or you need to keep, and then presenting that to the person that you're divorcing or their legal team and communicating what you want, what you need, and why, because you may have to justify why you should be the one to get to keep it. So again, it nothing changes, but some elements will have to change in your approach to it. And if you have kids, whatever you would have normally done to declutter or to make decisions on what to keep and not to keep is the same thing, right? Unless the kids now are going with the other spouse and whatever, pretty much kids are going to want all their toys and they're this and they're that. But the decluttering steps are the same.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Chrissy?
No, I think I agree. Again, I agree. And, there is an emotional, aspect of that as well. So again, just giving yourself time to really think about the emotional significance of whatever you're kind of contemplating doing with the stuff. Do it from a place of with the support, of experts, experts like Rose in this situation, as well as therapists and counselors, to do this at a very level-headed space, but you're still dealing with some very big emotions. So just kind of being aware of that. And also when divorces could be a very complicated times. And when there are kids involved, it can be very, very tricky. So just allowing space and time to support everyone's needs and emotional well-being, whether it is with the support of like a mental health professional, a counselor, someone to talk to. Don't act in isolation, especially if kids are involved, because you don't know how that would impact and complicate their emotions, their processing, their dealing with a very difficult life event, right? So taking some time and allowing that time to do it very thoughtfully would be my recommendation, and doing it with the support of experts like Rose and also counselors if we need to work through some emotional stuff and emotional attachment to things, especially when it's not only our attachment, but those of children as well.
Thanks for that. So to conclude, 3 tips from Rose about achieving decluttering success, and Dr. Chrissy, 3 tips to achieving decluttering success mentally. Rose.
Okay, so I would say, number 1, commit to the process. Know that the process is something that is going to take time, and that to act with kindness towards yourself and to the things that you own. And I would say simplify. Simplify, again, your process. Simplify by decluttering the things that you actually use, the things that you actually need to function, and obviously the things that you love, but really take a look at why do you love them, and can they be loved by someone else? So they can still receive love, but it doesn't have to be from you. And start small. So no matter what you're doing, I think whether you're decluttering or not, anything in life, to me, start small. Take a step, take a part of the house, take whatever it is that you need to do, but do it in small chunks, do it in small blocks, time blocks, set deadlines, give yourself accountability to the process. So whether it's like a friend saying, hey, so how's the process going with the bank that you said you were going to do by bank. So, having an accountability partner. If you do employ a professional person, you would also get that accountability partnership in that as well. So I think those are the 3 things that I would suggest to most people to start.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Dr. Chrissy, the mental aspect of decluttering.
Yeah, be kind to yourself. This is some hard work. None of this is easy, especially when we've grown an attachment to the things that we own. Sometimes we attach to it, sometimes it's just accumulation. But be kind to yourself. The process is very difficult, right? Because we're complex beings. I want to reiterate this again, experiences, our environment can affect our mental wellness. So when we think about decluttering, it's more than just a task or another thing to do, clean my closet. It's more do on our to-do list. These things are impacting our ability to manage our responsibilities on an everyday, to manage our stress levels, our anxiety levels, just to feel well and accomplished. So be mindful that cleaning your closet might be more than just cleaning your closet. It might be helping your mental health and your mental wellness in the long run. Everything is connected, right? We're not compartmentalized beings. We're all connected. The third thing, I might have four, I'm sorry. The third thing is ask for help. Like, we all need help, and that's why there are areas to assist you. There is schooling and there is certifications, and there are all these things that go into doing this well. And we don't have the capacity within us to do it all at an expert level. So why not engage the expertise when we can? Said, and I just want to reiterate again, small goals and celebrate it. You know, section these off into manageable steps that you know you could accomplish and focus. And when you do it, check it off, celebrate it. You've accomplished something that deserves to be.
Well, thank you so much to Chrissy Thomas Doyle, Dr. Chrissy Thomas Doyle, and Rose Nixon for this most informative, and I'm now very motivated, most motivating conversation about decluttering. And I'm going to have a conversation with the two of you offline about how I can sort of organize myself for decluttering success. Thank you very much to all of our audience for tuning in, for the folks who ask questions to add to our conversation. And I hope you all learned something and got something out of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing here